Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Bobby Pominville. I'm back with another interview this month, and I'm going into some really good reading material. I want to make sure you know about this. And I'm welcoming back an author and a friend of mine, and it's Diane Dettmann. So welcome back to the show, Diane.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. I'm so glad to be here and be able to talk about my latest book.
Well, we do enjoy talking about those things, and you're getting pretty prolific now. I don't think I've been able to keep up on all the books, so good for that. I mean, little background, you were born in Minneapolis. You attended the University of Minnesota. You were a teacher with the St. Paul schools. Of course, that's right up my line. You taught elementary. You were a little literary staff developer. You have national board certification, and you're an an instructor at the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Then you got your master's in curriculum and instruction from Hamline. And I just read about this today. You presented your thesis, The School of Bliss, a school designed for students' happiness, at the Research on Women in Education Conference in St. Paul. Now, you've had articles published in different, well, you might say publications and that, but there's one other thing that really caught my eye that I hadn't heard about before from you. Maybe we can just spend a little time on the Women's Voices for Change. You spoke there.
Actually, that's an online women's organization in New York City. And what they do is they actually recruited me as a Minnesota voice because I had left a comment on their website about something to do with women over 50, and they recruited me. So I've submitted a number of articles to them over the years. One was about getting remarried again after the death of my husband, and then inheriting a new mother-in-law and how all that went. So there's some humorous ones, and were some serious ones, and some just about living in rural Afton, Minnesota, and enjoying the farm life with the neighbors with sheep and that type of thing. So yeah, just.
So that's an online. Can you tell us how to get to that?
It's you just go to Women's Voices for Change, just Google it and it'll come up.
Okay, Women's Voices for Change. That's something I have to do because I just found out about it recently.
Okay.
And we are talking about your books today, but then was your first book written then after your husband passed away?
Actually, the first book was Miriam, Daughter of Finnish Immigrants.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
co-authored with my aunt.
Yes.
And this book actually came out of that class at the university, at Hamline University in my graduate program, where part of our task was to interview a woman an older woman who had gone through the educational system, the public schools. And so I decided to interview my three aunts.
Oh, perfect.
And so what ended up happening is we ended up with a story about my grandparents and the life up in rural Embarrass, Minnesota during the 1920s.
Oh my goodness,
Yes.
I've heard of that town.
Yes,
It's cold up there, I know that.
And then Miriam shared her story with me as far as what school was like. We were supposed to focus on their educational process. And so the book kind of evolved, and then we decided to write an actual book about it. And the manuscript went back and forth in the mail for 3 years, back and forth, snail mail, not email. And then we finally published the first edition in 1995, shortly after I got out of my graduate program.
Wonderful thing for your family.
It is, absolutely.
Oh, I just love it because I'm into genealogy a little bit too. And I have a cousin who's really helped me a lot in connecting. So then your second book was 28 Snow Angels.
Yes, the second book was 28 Snow Angels.
That was pretty much after your loss.
Yes, and it's pretty much all about the loss of my husband.
Yes.
And then starting over again as a woman. And I was not young. I was over 50 at the time. So the connections I've made with women's groups really kind of fits in. And so, and it was quite a journey for me. We were hooked at the hip. So this book ended up being the first book. It took me, a second book, and it took me 7 years to write because it was such a hard story to kind of spill out and onto the paper and to share with the public.
Yes.
But now I'm doing grief outreach at some churches. I do a presentation about my loss and share my experience. And then the Koch Funeral Home in Cottage Grove has me back every year annually to come and meet with their grief group. And they love having me come because I'm not a counselor. I'm just a person who's lost a spouse and gone through the process. And so they appreciate my transparency and honesty. So
You're so impressive with these things you're doing.
Thank you so
I just admire you so much.
Well, thank you.
And the next one is going to be just as wonderful because you have a World War II series, you might say.
I do.
A trilogy.
I do. It's a trilogy. It's 3 books. They're written a year apart. This one came out in 2015. This is the first book, Courageous Footsteps, a World War II novel, and it takes place, and it starts in a Japanese internment camp right after Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And then from there, it goes into the camps and follows the Sakamoto family through the years that they're in the camps, the hardships they have, and all the things they have to deal with. And then Yasu finds her way out of the camps before her parents do. She escapes, and that carries the reader into the second book.
Wonderful story. And did you have some, I don't know, it seems like I remember you lived close by to some Japanese Americans.
I did. I had a family that lived across the street from me in North Minneapolis in the 50s.
Okay.
And both parents had been interned in camps. One was in Arizona, and the other one was in California.
Right.
Yeah, there are 2 different camps, and they had been in prison for 3-4 years, and then released. And when they came back to their homes in California, there wasn't a lot of the people didn't have anything left. They were either ruined or sold or whatever. So Art and his wife ended up in Minneapolis, and I got to know their daughter really well, and I walked her to school. And she remembers following my footprints through the snow as a child.
Oh, how wonderful.
And I remembered her being picked on a lot because she was Japanese.
Yes, yes.
And it was right after World War II.
Yeah.
And so, and I didn't understand it then. And then when I found out that her parents later on had been interned, I got wondering what that was all about. So that's what kind of triggered my research to go and look at that.
Oh my! So you really had some firsthand knowledge there.
Yes, yes, I did. Even though Art wasn't real open about talking about it.
I imagine, yeah,
And he
painful time.
Yes, and I asked, well, how did you feel about it? He said, you know what, we just did what we had to do.
Oh,
so
it's a terrible time in our history.
It is.
And, you know, there isn't really a lot of information about it. So this is really good that you went into that.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate that. And then the fact that you're writing from the eyes and mind of Yasu, am I saying it right?
Yes.
And she's a girl who has a lot of courage, so perfect. And then the second book, Yasu's Quest, A Tale of Triumph.
Yes.
So that follows her through what exactly?
It picks up where the first one leaves off, where she gets out of the camp around a year before it closes, and she escapes because her brother has been killed in the war. He was recruited out of the camps as a Japanese American for the 442nd Regiment, which was made up of all Japanese men.
You know, I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, and they served in Europe, and it's the most highly decorated regiment of people in the Army at that point in time in World War II.
Wonderful.
And so she was brokenhearted about that, so it pushed her to leave, and she ends up on a train headed to Minneapolis, and she meets a University of Minnesota professor. A woman who takes her under her wing and brings her into her home. and which isn't really that uncommon back then. People did that type of thing back in the probably post-World War II era. So, so that's what continues the story. She leaves the barbed wire behind, and she starts in Minneapolis a new life, but she still has a lot of challenges to overcome.
Yes, a lot. So from there, now how many years ago was that? Just not too long ago.
No, it wasn't. This one came out in 2015.
Okay.
This one came out in 2016. So there's a
yes.
year between this one and this one. And On Liberty's Wings, which is the most recent one.
That's the one we want to dwell on a bit here.
So this one came out in 2017 in October. It was released not that long ago.
That's right, because that's when you started to contact me, and I was like, I don't know what I was busy with, but something was going on. And I thought in the back of my mind, we're just going to have to get together and talk. So I'm glad we did.
I'm glad we did too.
So a little bit about that new book.
Okay, well, let's start with the cover of the book.
Yes, let's.
The cover is a mixture of a
Yeah,
photo.
very
The
interesting.
sunrise is taken from a photograph I shot off our deck one morning in Afton. It was, you can see the Hudson or the Wisconsin shoreline there.
Oh
or a tree line.
my.
And so the artist integrated that with the origami butterfly.
Oh, that's.
And I wanted the book to have a sense of renewal and hope, because the other two are really dark covers with you know, the shadow and the sense of not a lot of hope and not a lot of light there at all. And this is more saying there's hope because now we're free and the war is over and America's on its way to rebuilding itself. And so it's this hopeful feeling, and yet there's certain amount of ups and downs for Yasu and her family yet. So.
Yes, and the symbol of the butterfly. It's so nice to see after the other two books, and they're pretty serious, but yet such good stories. But then to see that butterfly on there, it does give hope.
It does, absolutely.
Very nice. But I had no idea that was the St. Croix River Valley.
I was so excited when I received the print of the cover. I was just really excited about it because it's just, I thought they did a really nice job.
It's very stunning. It draws you.
Oh, that's
very nice.
Great, yes.
So it turned out the way you wanted it to.
It did.
And you got a lot said, and you brought Yasu into a little bit farther into the future.
Exactly, exactly.
She's married now.
Yes, she's married, and her family has left the home of the university professor, and they have moved to a smaller place because the father is having some lung issues or a disease caused by some of the pollution in the camp, because he worked on a lot of the barracks that were being built. So the materials and things that he was exposed to caused some lung issues. So he couldn't do stairs, and the other house had a lot of steps. So they found this small little bungalow, which is kind of based on a picture of my own home. And yeah, if you want me to show you, I'll show you a little picture. I don't know if you'll be able to pick this up at all, but see, it's that little tiny house there. It's a little bungalow. It was on 13th Avenue in North Minneapolis.
Oh, that looks like a typical house.
It does.
Yeah, so that works well.
Yeah.
So that's why, and then they did get into their own home.
Yes, and then
it must have been hard times still, though.
It was, and it was hard for them to find a home, buy a home.
Right.
And that was one of my friend's experiences when he moved to Minneapolis here. He could not purchase a house.
Oh.
Because he was Japanese American.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I think they rented some small little place for a while, he and his wife. And then he eventually got a job after lots of refusals. I mean, a lot of people that wouldn't hire him because of the fact he was Japanese. But he eventually was able to purchase a house because his boss co-signed for him.
Now, what year would that be?
It would be I would guess they were probably in Minneapolis, I would say 1948. He probably moved in, and then their daughter was born a few years after that. So it was right after the war was over. Yeah, it just...
Well, that's very sad.
It is
But
very
it's
sad.
part of our history, too.
Yes, and that's kind of what happens in the story too. Yasu and her family run into a lot of things. Even though the war's over, they're feeling like it's all going to be better, but it isn't, because there's still the bias and the prejudice and that type of thing to overcome. Her husband has difficulty finding a job, Masato, and so type of thing. And then I also have a diagram of the inside of the house here, because that's the way I write. I'm very visual, so I have to diagram things out so I can move the characters through the space and things. So
that's part of your technique for writing.
Yes,
and it
absolutely.
probably aids you quite a bit.
It does, absolutely.
So how far along do we go now with the family? How are they much older by the end of the book, or is it like 1 year in their life?
So about 2 to 3 years, I think.
Okay.
That covers their life, and they go through, like I said, a lot of ups and downs. And Yasu has a teaching job. She got that through the help of her professor that she knew at the University of Minnesota, and another woman professor that helped her get to her interview, drove her. That happens in Yasu's Quest, the second book. And so it's definitely, it has a lot of the qualities of a woman's story, and a lot of seeing it from a woman's point of view type of thing.
That's so nice to hear.
Well, that's good, yeah.
Because we like to promote women, don't we?
Absolutely.
And so you can't tell us a whole lot about the story, but it's just a part of their lives as they're sort of gaining more confidence and maybe making friends, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. They're making some friends, like the neighbors next door. And Yasu's mother is very pleased that there's a little grocery store right across the street, so she gets to know the grocery store owner and that type of thing. And there's a lot of World War II and post-World War II culture that's built into the story. And I especially liked researching this book, because it was kind of in my era when TV came into play.
Oh, yes.
So what I did is I went through there. I'll show you a couple items I worked off of. I printed out calendars of the 1946, 47, and 48, so I could have a kind of a sense of when Christmas happened. So I had a kind of a timeline, and so I had those and different holidays that were observed, and then I really enjoyed looking up the television and radio shows online. and then see, what I found was a list of different TV shows and the year they started, and then the year they ended. And it's really important with historical fiction that you don't put something in there that you think happened at that time and it happened later, because then somebody will pick up on that, because people that are into historical fiction, and you have all sorts of viewpoints that are coming to that book, and you never know what they might notice. Well, that story, that TV show wasn't out at that time.
Whoa,
So
that's true.
It's very true. And so like this one has Howdy Doody from December 27th, 1947 to 1960, so that way you're in the right range and things. And the original Amateur Hour, those types of things.
Oh, yes. Oh, heavens, I remember some of those shows, because I was a little girl when the TV came out.
Absolutely.
And I remember sitting there looking at that snowy screen.
Yes.
And then finally, we got some images.
I know, and when in the morning the test pattern would be there, my brother and I would watch the test pattern. I mean, it was that much of a fascination.
Yeah, it was.
It was just like huge technology for us. It was like,
my.
whoa.
And just think of where we are now.
I know.
Oh, well, yeah. And some of those shows were my favorite.
I know.
Favorite things to watch. And I know every Saturday night we had to watch the talent show.
Yes.
And it was, I think, part of what I loved about music came from that show.
Could be, absolutely.
Because I got so into it.
I know.
And that was the tradition in our house. We had certain things we would watch.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's really, and that's nice to hear that it's historically true.
Exactly, and it's woven with a lot of the foods of the 1940s and 50s.
Oh, yes.
My mother had a good housekeeping cookbook, and right in the middle of the cookbook is a blue war supplement. So when I was working on the first 2 books, I could look in there to see what kinds of foods they were eating, and they ate a lot of like liver and different kinds of meats that we wouldn't normally eat because they were trying to conserve. And then I also had my mother-in-law's ration coupon book that I could look at.
Oh, my.
So it kind of grounded me in that whole
Yes.
period of time and what life must
How
have been for those
interesting.
people back then, including my parents. Both my parents, of course, grew
Yes,
up in that
because
era.
they lived through it.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's just, it was a time in history that I think I was born during that war, the 42, in 42. My sister was 41. And, you know, I can't even imagine what that was like then
I can't
for
either.
families. And I know it was a very difficult time in our history.
Absolutely.
And they didn't talk much about it.
No, they didn't.
That's the problem. You have to get these stories out of people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like even when you're doing genealogy, it's so important before, you know, your oldest living relative dies that you get those stories.
That's why I'm so glad my aunt and I put together that book, Miriam, Daughter of
Yes.
Finnish Immigrants.
Yeah, that is really important to me.
It is, because none of that whole family is gone now. Every one of the siblings and the parents. So
Yeah, we've lost a generation, haven't we?
we have, definitely.
So that's really good that you do that and you take such care with it.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate that too. Well, would this be a good time to read an excerpt?
I could do that, absolutely. And before I read it, also I want to mention my editor.
Yes.
Her name is Janine Savage, and I found her online, and she has a background in historical fiction, or fiction and history. She was a history major, so it really helped to have her as my editor, because she
that
could
helps.
find, you know, as she was reading through the manuscript in early stages, she could see if there's something that was out of place, or an actress I mentioned in a movie, but that actress wasn't either in that movie or wasn't there during that period of time.
Right.
So that way I could make sure it was pretty historically correct, even though there'll probably be some discrepancy, but that's the way it is.
That's really interesting because I don't think about that very much. I think of a lot of fiction. Probably some of the things I read are just totally fictionist.
Right, that you can just make up.
And you can make up anything and interject things.
That's right.
So good for you. And you've had the same publisher for all the books?
Miriam's book was published with a small press, a Finnish press,
Oh,
but all the other ones are from Outskirts Press. And I've had different
Yes.
editors, however, for different books.
Oh, sure.
The 3 books in the series were all edited by Janine Savage. So, yeah.
Oh, good for you. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what you're going to read from the book.
Well, I'm going to read just a little section at the very front of the book, and I would like to read the quote I start the book out with is from Samuel Smiles, and it kind of goes along with the cover of the book in terms of a sense of hope.
Oh, yes.
Hope is like the sun, which as we journey toward it, casts the shadow of our burdens behind us. And that's pretty much what the book is about, that the family has this hope, they're going forward in their life, and they're trying to cast those burdens behind them, but that they still have some barriers they have to overcome. So I think that pretty much summarizes pretty much what the book is about. But I can read a small excerpt from page 2, and this starts in Minneapolis in 1948, and the family, like I said, has moved there. And Yasu's father is struggling with that lung condition, but he is still very, very attached to Yasu. They're like peas in a pod, and they've always been that way. And his nickname for her has been Butterfly ever since she was a little girl. So that's part of the reason the butterfly's on the cover, too. "Good morning, my sweet butterfly," father said, and suddenly began to cough. He covered his mouth and cleared his throat. "Father, are you feeling okay?" Yasu asked. "I'm fine, just a little tickle." It's nothing. You look radiant this morning. Marriage agrees with you." Yasu blushed as she poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "Yes, I'm very happy, not only for my marriage to Masato, but also for having you and Mother here. I prayed so hard that the two of you would be released from the camp and we'd be together again." Yasu took a sip of coffee. "I miss Haro so much. He could be a tease, but I loved him dearly. When he and Masato left that day, I never imagined he would not come back." Father stared out the kitchen window. "I know. I miss him every single day and always will. It's hard losing those you love, especially your child." A few minutes later, Mother shuffled in with a huge basket of laundry and set it in the porch. She took the coffee pot from the stove, refilled Father's cup, and poured one for herself. After a short visit, Father grabbed his lunchbox and left for his machine job at International Harvester. As Yasu walked to campus, she thought about how her life had changed since the prison camps. The overcrowded barracks, the noisy mess hall, and the stinky latrines flashed through her mind. Her fingers' tips stung as she remembered the long days in the desert sun as they worked on the camouflage netting crew. She and the other Japanese women wove rough strips of fabric together under the watchful eyes of the armed guards. So that was kind of a sense of her experience in the camps and the memories that she's carrying here to Minneapolis at this point in her life. And so the book goes on and carries Yasu through her teaching career and all sorts of different experiences she has. So
does she end up, do you mention she ends up at the university?
Well,
you don't really mention it.
I don't mention that.
But I'm kind of thinking that way.
Actually, she's at the U of M here.
Oh, yeah.
In the first book.
There you
as
go.
a student.
Okay.
Yep. But she manages to land the teaching job along with the help of the professors from the first book, the second book there.
That sounds difficult.
It was very hard because, number one, she had her degree. She worked really hard to get a degree.
Yes.
And the problem for her, too, was she was taken away from her home when she was 15. She was still in school when the internment camps were established. So she had no high school diploma. So she had not completed her education.
Oh, right.
So to get into the university in and of itself was a difficult barrier for her to overcome.
Right.
And her professor friend helped her through that process. So she bonded with a few people that really took her under her wing and really gave her some guidance. But it did take a lot of courage and a lot of determination.
And in those days, not everybody went to college.
No, they didn't.
There's a lot of people that had to work and go help their fathers or whatever.
Exactly.
So that was, I don't know, it's a really upbeat story.
Yes.
Yeah.
I enjoyed writing it very much. It was
Oh, yeah, because it's so positive now after all the other things. Sometimes you're writing about really emotional, heavy things.
Exactly.
And even the war and the prison camp.
Oh,
and so it's nice to have that.
That's
Good.
right, absolutely.
Okay, well, now I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
What are your plans for future books?
Okay, well, everybody wants a sequel to this one, so they really
good.
they want a
I
fourth
do.
book. I don't know if I have it in me though, but that is one item that I might consider. It takes a lot of energy to do and a lot of work to do the history background and all the research and things, but I might consider that one. I do have two books in my file that have been there. One has been there since 1995. It's a cookbook I started with my first husband who passed away.
Oh.
He and I were working on a book it was a relationship cookbook.
Oh.
Really? Yeah, so I might pick that one up. And then I started another book when I was teaching at Highwood Hills Elementary in St. Paul. And I had a third grade class, and it was 1997, and I started writing a book about camel crickets. And so I have that manuscript is pretty like 2/3 done, so I might pick that one up
Really?
this year, in a couple months and start reworking it.
Yeah.
And it would be like a middle grade to high school adults could enjoy it.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see kind of what
Yeah.
happens. And
Oh boy, you have ideas, and that's wonderful. And you know what? You just really got your latest book published not even a year ago.
no, that's right. Came out.
So
in
maybe
October.
you do need a little time off to renew, and
Yes.
you know.
And it takes quite a bit of time to promote, to get out there.
Oh
to
yes,
sign-
it does. And you know what?
signings and that kind of thing.
Now I have to ask you. You have to answer this because I want to know about the awards you've won.
Okay. Well.
Don't be shy.
Okay,
Share
I'll
it
try
with
not to be
us.
shy.
I want to hear about it.
Well, the first award I actually received was on 28 Snow Angels. It was a runner-up in the Beach Book Festival Awards.
Yes.
And I was really happy for it to get some acknowledgement because it was my very first real big memoir that I did by myself. And like I said, it took 7 years for me to really pour it onto the pages. So I was really excited about that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and then this Courageous Footsteps has won a number of awards, actually. There's two I have on the cover of this book, the Pacific Rim, and it was the winner of that festival, came in first place. And then the Great Midwest Book Festival Award it won also as runner-up in that one.
Oh, wow.
And then we're hoping that On Liberty's Wings gets an award. I have it submitted to several different contests and awards, so I'm hoping I should know by the end of this year whether that one will receive a reward or not. But they've all received excellent reviews, and Marianne Grossman wrote a wonderful review about On Liberty's Wings in the Sunday paper. It was. I have a copy here.
Yes.
I had it hanging on my wall for a while.
Of course. That's so neat because that
Yes.
really gets the word out. And to
Yes.
make it into the paper like that.
Right, and it was on. I was interviewed by two different editors, one for the Lowdown and also for the Star Observer. It was online in the Star
Yes, it
Observer.
was. Yes.
So, and I just appreciate. I want to thank the people that interviewed me and all the people that put this on publications because it really does help. And this was from January 14th. And this, I'll read just a little piece of what Marianne Grossman said.
Please do.
And she called it the pick of the week, and it says, Diane Dettmann reads from third installment of our Yasu Nakahara trilogy. And she said, the book is suffused with post-war music, radio shows, and other entertainment. It was a time when it was legal for the rude school principal to ask Yasu if she was going to get pregnant and warns her that if that happens, she must stop teaching. When Yasu asks her mother how to prevent pregnancy, her mother says the only option is abstinence. But she will ask around about other birth control possibilities. Running through the story is the ugly prejudice against American citizens who have roots in Japan. When a parent pulls his daughter out of Yasu's class, Masato, Yasu's husband, says, sometimes I think the war may be over, but feel our battles will always be a part of us.
Oh, that's really well written.
And I was just really pleased to see it in so many,
Very
get
nice.
such nice coverage in so many different
Yes,
places.
it's so nice for you to get that recognition, and you deserve it
Absolutely.
so
Well,
much.
Thank you.
But I just, I don't know why, but I really identify with that because I do have some memories of growing up, and I don't know, once in a while there'd be comments made about the war and that, and I couldn't quite understand why people felt that way about the Japanese.
I agree.
But it makes sense. It really does make sense. But it's so great the way you explain it because you're bringing out what truly happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So very, very good. Congratulations
Well,
for all of that.
Thank you.
And do you have a website people can go to?
Yes, I do, and it's www.outskirtspress.com/liberty.
This has been great fun.
I've enjoyed it, Bobby,
I
very
just
much.
enjoy talking with you so much, and it's just wonderful to get caught up and, well, sometime in the future.
Yes,
Let
yes,
me
I
know.
hope so. We'll see.
All right. So thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for all the support you've given me. It means the
Oh.
world to me. And just as it's a
You're
it's a
so
gift.
welcome. I just really enjoy supporting you and promoting what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's so impressive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching today.